It's go time.
Welcome to Quick Kicks here on Third Down Gamble with your hosts, Don Charbin and Heath Graham.
Glad you're back with us here on Third Down Gamble. I'm Don Charbin along with Heath Graham. The 2025 CFL draft is in the books. We'll get to that in a moment, Heath. I want to let our listeners know that a couple things are coming up. One, we've got JC Abbott, who was a co-host on the 3 Down Nation podcast that was also on YouTube with Ben Grant, and they did a full feature on the draft as it went live. They went all Tuesday night to cover that. They did a fantastic job of it, so in-depth in their coverage. Also, a note out to you Stampeder fans, Tom Forzani is going to be on the podcast. That'll be in a few weeks' time as well. Keep that marked in your calendars. Heath, we do know that the draft is in the books. Not a lot of surprises as we look at it. Maybe in the really, and I didn't think that was going to happen, but I'm glad it did anyway. 2 quarterbacks get drafted.
We've talked about that for the last couple of months, speculating on where they might go. Do you use an early pick and hope they're going to be CFL bound? Do you use a little bit of caution, fill some other spots first and pick them up? And what happened was the Bombers draft Taylor Elgersma with the number 18 pick. The Saskatchewan Roughriders take Curtis Rourke with number 25. So the Bombers pick was that supplemental second round pick they get for having addressed the most Canadians or the most Canadian snaps in the last season. So kind of a bonus spot. It was a good opportunity for them to take somebody like Taylor Elgersma and hope he turns into a CFL quarterback. And then a little bit further down the line, the Roughriders wanted in on it as well and snapped up Curtis Rourke.
Curtis Rourke, of course, everyone knows that he was picked in the 7th round by the San Francisco 49ers in the NFL, 227th overall. You're getting to the point at which you're lucky to be drafted because the next option is a free agent tryout right after that. So that gives him a leg up. That gives him a little bit more capital because the 49ers have shown an interest in him. But does that mean that he's going to have a job? No, he's in a major competition to get onto that roster. He has every opportunity. There was speculation that it could be up to 4 years before he could be seen in the CFL. I kind of think that's at the high end. I know that probably in 2025, he's going to be very focused on what's happening with the NFL. But then after 2025, if, say, the 49ers move in a different direction or decide that this isn't going to work, they're not that heavily invested in him. They could let him go if he slides through all of the NFL teams that have a chance at him. He could be in the CFL in 2026.
We're looking at some exciting times. We could have almost half of the league with Canadian starters by 2026 or 27. Rourke's in a tough spot in San Francisco, being a late round draft pick, but he's also going to camp behind Brock Purdy, who was the last draft pick of his draft year and has developed into a starter and a Pro Bowl quarterback in San Francisco. Anything is possible. I agree with you, though. I don't see Curtis Rourke bouncing around the NFL if he doesn't land an opportunity in the next season or two. And Taylor Elgersma is even more of a long shot in the NFL because he is an undrafted free agent. He's got invites to some mini camps, but he's got to show a lot fast in order to stick with an NFL franchise. I think this is a great pick for the Blue Bombers. We know Zach Collaros does not have many more seasons, perhaps even only one more season as quarterback in Winnipeg. I think that starting job is his as long as he wants it, but knowing that they've got somebody like Elgersma to develop as a Canadian starting quarterback, I think the Bombers are pretty happy to snatch him up at number 18.
I think you're spot on with what you said because we know that Zach Collaros was musing about not coming back even for this year, and because of the injury that he suffered in the Grey Cup to his throwing hand, that maybe it just wasn't going to be in the cards for him. Now he has decided to make a go of it, and he's going to be back on the field. And I imagine the biggest carrot out there is the hosting city is Winnipeg for this Grey Cup, and every opportunity to be there would be fantastic. I'm sure that was a carrot for a lot of the veterans to come back to the Blue Bombers in this past season. The the curious thing to me about Elgersma, and this is the one thing that I think is going to be the hardest thing for him to overcome, is he is a U Sport quarterback. The NFL typically does not come up to recruit U Sport athletes unless they're doing something absolutely beyond belief. Now, Elgersma was in that category, but as a quarterback, it's never really the common idea among NFL general managers or scouts to come up and check this out. However, they did invest enough in him to ask a lot of questions. They checked in with some CFL GMs and coaches about him. He certainly has got his chance. And to be behind Zach Collaros, if you can be in that quarterback room and just ask a million questions of Collaros about what he sees out there, that's going to be a great resource.
It is, and I'm just salivating thinking of Labor Day games and Banjo Bowls for many years to come with two star Canadian quarterbacks battling it out in Regina and Winnipeg in back-to-back weeks. That's a lot of talent and a lot of excitement to be energized about.
Now, the Stampeders started the night picking up Damian Alford, who was with Utah the last season. However, he really didn't play. In fact, his last time that he spent a lot of energy on the field was with Syracuse, and he had made the transfer to go to Utah because he wasn't sure about the quarterbacking situation. Didn't work out. He has all of those measurables that you want. He's big, he's 6'6", and he's quick. The Stampeders want to have depth at Canadian wide receiver. This, I thought, was a great move by them.
It was, yeah, you're right. A tall and speedy receiver who's Canadian is something that every CFL team is looking for. And to be able to grab somebody of his caliber in that first overall pick, I think suits the Stampeders very well. They've got some talented receivers in the lineup already, some veteran guys there that can teach him the pro game. I think he's got a very bright future.
The Stampeders, of course, had 3 picks in the first 17. They didn't go for any reaches. They basically stayed tried and true. They picked up Christopher Fortin from Yukon in the end of the first round, and that was an offensive lineman, again, addressing need. The Stampeders were high on addressing need in this early part of the draft. And then they finished with Quincy Vaughn, who was a tight end with North Dakota, a guy that can probably start out on teams, but ultimately is going to be a guy that's going to be protecting the edge. He's going to be a bigger body, can pick up linebacking blitzes, and then if nothing is happening, you can go out and catch passes.
I'd love to see more of this fullback tight end style of player get back into the CFL offenses. 6'4", 251 pounds. He is a big body out there. He's going to be that guy, as you said, protecting the quarterback, but can do some damage in the open field if you can get him the ball.
And that's going to be the job of Vernon Adams Jr. And Vernon Adams Jr. likes his big receivers. Now, this was a little nugget that came out during the show, was that Vernon Adams Jr. has a tendency to throw the ball high. That's why he likes taller receivers. So Justin McInnes had a career with Vernon Adams Jr. last year, and part of the reason was Vernon tends to overthrow ever so slightly. And if you got that extra height to your body, then you can get those hands up there and make catches. Keelan White was the second receiver picked in the first 3 draft picks overall. 1991 was the last time that we saw that high of a run on wide receivers in a CFL draft.
Not quite as big, but certainly speedy. He comes out of Montana, the University of Montana. The scouts have compared him to the Philpott brothers, which is a great comparison for somebody wanting to break into the CFL. I think he's a great fit as well for the Ottawa Red Blacks. Drew Brown has established himself as the starting quarterback. He needs some weapons there in that receiving core, and to have somebody sure-handed that can help you move the chains down the field is a great pickup.
Winnipeg goes with Connor Shea at linebacker with their pick in the first round at number 6. Let's look at this from the broad perspective. The Blue Bombers are getting older on defense. Willie Jefferson isn't young anymore. They're starting to show a little bit of age. And one of the things that Kyle Walters said during the show was that they needed to regenerate. They had to get some people. And this is one of the ways they can figure this out. A linebacker, they also picked up a linebacker with their very next pick as well. That to me is addressing that vacuum that was left behind when they decided not to re-sign Adam Bighill.
It's always fascinating to watch Winnipeg because they are not afraid to have Canadian starters in their lineup in the non-traditional Canadian positions. If they're looking at depth at linebacker, picking up 2 of them in those first 2 rounds, first 15 picks overall, indicates to me that they're looking at adding some Canadian depth and maybe some Canadian starters into that linebacking core. Jalen Smith comes out of the University of North Texas as well. He was kind of the 3rd ranked linebacker in the scouting report for the Bombers to get 2 of the top 3 linebackers in this draft, with the second one dropping as far as the 15th pick. That's a huge get for the Bombers if they're looking to rejuvenate that defense and get some youth in there.
Winnipeg is not afraid to pick what they feel is the best athlete left on the board when their term comes up. They did it here with these 2 linebackers. Both may be, well, especially their first round pick may not be available to them for a year or 2, but they're willing to live with that. We're starting to see a change in the thinking of CFL teams where in the first round a few years ago, they would take these reach picks with these guys that have NFL opportunities and live with it. See what would happen if they got them, great. If they didn't, Carl Hortigo comes to mind. You're seeing in the last couple of years, first round picks are more about getting a starter, that they want somebody that can actually slot right in right away and not have to worry too much about the NFL. And what they will forgive is if they have a free agent tryout, but they don't want to be going after draft picks.
It's always that interesting argument of, do you want to take the best player available or do you want to take the most likely CFL player available? And that's always a tough call for these coaches and general managers to make when they're in that war room trying to decide what to do. And I think a lot of times you do have to look at who can start for us next year or the year after. We need to get somebody in here that fits in the ratio, fits into a spot that we're comfortable with and can start for us right away. You can burn your later on picks on a dream. We even saw that the Toronto Argonauts added Shedeur Sanders to their negotiation list. Now, he's a highly touted American player, quarterback. He dropped rapidly in the NFL draft, so the Argos felt maybe there's a chance he's going to come up here. It doesn't cost them anything to add him to their neg list, and they're taking a chance that that somebody with a flashy primetime name might end up here in the CFL in the next couple of years as well.
As you mentioned, the neg list, it's 50 player names deep. And if you put him on, you have to take somebody off. But essentially what that means is that if all their options in the United States, essentially the NFL, are used up or are not available to them anymore, and they want to look north, they have to go through Toronto or Saskatchewan or Calgary. Whatever team has them on their neg list, that's their first port of call. That's where they're the team that gets dibs on these players as they come up. If they don't agree to something, then sometimes you see trades among neg lists because the player doesn't want to play here, but maybe somewhere else.
Exactly. And just circling back to Winnipeg and their Canadian position players, they also made a trade earlier in the week, picking up a running back, Matthew Peterson, in a trade with the Tiger Cats. Again, that's a position that we know. Brady Oliveira, Canadian running back, they're building some depth behind him as well so that they can keep that position, a Canadian position on the team. I think it was a smart pickup by them. They traded defensive lineman Kyle Sampson to the Ticats, and they've added some more Canadian backup behind Brady.
You always have to think about your future, and it's almost like a college situation. This would be the same in the NFL, although maybe less so, but you have to think about what's going to happen in 3 to 5 years. And if you don't have a succession plan, then you are going to be running into trouble. The Blue Bombers have been pretty good about it. Let's face it, 5 Grey Cups in a row that they've appeared in, that maybe the results in the game weren't the greatest, but they still got there, which means that they're at the top of their game in the West. That's not a bad place to be. You've got to, though, keep in mind that players age out, that there's going to be a point at which these guys are going to be moving on, whether by retirement or by the simple fact that their body just doesn't want to do this anymore.
And you look at the start of that run of Grey Cups, the Canadian running back of note was Andrew Harris. They moved him out, brought Brady Oliveira up into a perennial all-star and most outstanding player candidate. And now he's into his late 20s. They picked up a 24-year-old as another running back. So they're keeping things fresh. They're keeping young legs in there that can step in when those starters start to age out.
Now, we were musing before about why Calgary got 2 first-round picks, and we finally got it explained to us. The British Columbia Lions had made a trade with the Calgary Stampeders some time ago, and they had swapped into the first round to pick up the second pick for them, and would have been the 9th pick overall in the 2025 draft. However, because of the fact that BC went so far over the cap, they had to forfeit 2 picks, and bingo, the Stampeders got the first overall and that one that came up with the 8th spot. Now, why the 8th spot? Because Edmonton basically used their first round pick last year with their territorial pick.
Clear as mud. There's always some little wrinkles in the system. And this was a big draft year for the Calgary Stampeders, as we discussed before, getting that extra pick in there. 3 of the top 17 picks in the CFL draft really allows them to restock the cupboards.
The Lions, though, weren't quiet on the day. They did make a trade with the Toronto Argonauts to swap draft picks and move up the ladder. And what they did do was get Jackson Findlay, who had played at Western, a safety there. And he is a BC boy that's going to be coming back home. He's also a 4th-generation CFL player.
He is, and he's had uncles and father and grandfather in the league. It's a big win for the BC Lions to pick him up. There was a lot of talk earlier on in the draft. He fell to 16th, but they were talking at around pick number 10 that we were likely to see his name soon. So I'm sure the Lions are thrilled to get him at the 16th spot.
One of the things that was speculated upon during the draft, and I think this is true, this is the Andrew Buckley sort of experience, where Jackson Findlay is looking future to become a pediatrician. With Andrew Buckley, he gave up his football career early to pursue his medical profession, and they worry about these guys that have this calling. They do wonder if they're going to stick it out all the way through what would have been their career before they step into the medical ring.
Professional football is a young man's game, though, so even if a guy plays 3 or 4 years, that's above the average of a CFL career. If you get more out of a guy, that's fantastic, but you have to be happy with getting 3 or 4 productive seasons out of somebody. If he chooses to go that long before pursuing his medical career, I think that's a great spot for the BC Lions.
This is Andrew Hoskins of the Turf District Podcast, and you're listening to the Third Down Gamble Pod.
Trevor Harris, when his career is over, has hinted that he would love to be calling games as a color analyst for TSN. That sort of came out of the blue, but what do you think of it?
It's interesting. He was speaking very highly of Levi Mitchell as well, who has filled into some color spots or some panel spots already, and he doesn't want to step on his toes. But the thing with Trevor Harris is he's seen a lot of football on a lot of different teams throughout his CFL career and could bring a very unique perspective to the booth. I love having ex-players in there until they get to the point where they kind of age out of the booth, if you will. So getting some fresh 40-year-olds into the booth now is a great look, and they've played the modern game. They're familiar with a lot of the players. It's a great way to ease into retirement.
Knowing a lot of the players sometimes is also a way to keep you quiet, because you don't really want to be too critical of somebody that was your teammate not that long ago. If he does step into the booth, I think he'll do well. The big thing about guys that do color is that you've got to be analytical and you've got to be willing to speak. You can't sit there and just let the play-by-play guy call the game and not do anything. You're not a cheerleader. You're there to analyze. One of the greatest that I ever heard was Frank Rigney. He was an offensive lineman with the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. He moved into the booth, started with CBC, eventually wound up with CTV at the time. But he was fantastic because he would take you inside the play and dissect it for you, explain the blocking, explain why the quarterback was moving this way. Ron Lancaster was another one who always could figure out a way to explain what was happening to you.
It's a tough balancing act because you want to be able to explain without being overly technical and losing the viewers. A career football player knows the game inside out, knows all the nuances of the calls, and sometimes they can be a bit confusing to the average viewer. So you have to be able to communicate what you see, but to a point where fans can get what you're saying.
Well, this is where technology is your friend. Using the telestrator, or maybe they'll have some other devices in the coming years to show what you mean. So if he's saying that the quarterback had a soft read over here and his number 3 was over there, well, he could show it on the telestrator that, okay, this is where he's supposed to basically disguise what he's looking at, but he's actually following this guy over here. And you can see that on the screen. I think as you speak to that, then you educate, illuminate, and people will be able to follow along.
Paul Lapalisse is a great example of that. He is a very technically minded football coach, but he's finding his way in television and being able to break those things down. The first couple of games where he was a color guy, I think he did get a little bit too technical at times, but he's found his calling, he's found his audience, his comfort level, and brings a really great point of view to calling these games.
Well, talking to Darren Flutie when I had the chance to, he mentioned that you have to become relaxed in the booth, that you have to find your rhythm, your patterns. He was intimidated at the time because, of course, he was moving up to work with Chris Cuthbert, who was a phenom and still is, and as he calls hockey. For Darren to move into that situation in Calgary for the first time, that was quite intimidating. And you've got to get past that because you're a partnership up there. You're depending on that other person to talk with you, help you along, and basically add some color to the game. I worked with a guy when I was doing broadcasts here in Saskatoon of Saskatoon Hilltops Prairie Junior football conference games for Shaw Cable at the time. I had Jim Zilke with me, and he was fantastic. We could just feed off of each other. It was easy. It was comfortable. I knew when to stop. I knew when Jim had to say something. He knew when to stop when the play was coming back. You get that rhythm, and it just basically it fits.
You get the sense that Trevor Harris bringing this up at this point is he's starting to realize that maybe it's 1 year, 2 years left of playing football before he starts looking at what comes next?
You got to think so because he's 39 right now. And if you look back at the last 6 years, he's the quarterback that has missed the most games due to injury. People would think, oh, no, that's Zach Glarus. No, Zach has actually been on the field quite a bit. It's Trevor Harris. He's the one that's struggled. And how many times is he going to take an injury and end his season quickly before it starts to really sort of hit him in a sense that, hey, maybe this isn't worth it anymore. My body just isn't responding to this kind of contact anymore.
We've already talked a bit about Canadian athletes getting a look south of the border. Word has come out that Terrell Ford turned down multiple NFL offers to stay in the CFL to sign in Edmonton to play alongside his brother Trey. He didn't have any guaranteed money or signing bonus opportunities. This, I feel, speaks volumes to the quality of the CFL that he was willing to turn down some of those chances to sign with the Elks.
He's got a coach that believes in him. He's got a GM that believes in him. And looking long term, he's 27 right now. He's only got 10 more years. If you start frittering away trying to get back into the NFL, you may never play again. And what do you want to do? Is it about money? Okay, great. Go to the NFL and make it. But if you want to play, then the CFL is your better bet. And of course, he gets to play with his brother. Terrell Ford is starting to mature and realize how precious this time he has.
He does. And I think what's important to remember is Terrell Ford missed the 2023 CFL season because he was going after NFL opportunities. He had a bit of a workout with the Green Bay Packers. Things didn't work out to allow him to be on the field in regular season games. He came into Winnipeg in 2024 and really lit the league on fire as a Canadian DB, gave himself that opportunity to sign the big free agent contract. And he is well paid for a defensive back in the CFL. And it's not worth the risk for him to fritter that away to pursue American opportunities that aren't guaranteed.
And you're right about that. He is a shutdown corner in the CFL. He put up some great numbers when he was with Winnipeg. That's going to be a big hole for them to try to fill. They didn't do it with the draft that I saw. He's one of those types of guys that really understands the game and just knows where to be and when he's supposed to be there. Playing with his twin, of course, is a fantastic opportunity. You've got the Ford brothers, one on offense, one on defense. This Elks team will be a lot of fun to watch. Of course, he's got a very enthusiastic coach in Mark Killam to guide him through all of this. J.C. Sherritt, who helped with the Rough Riders defense last year, is over there as their D coordinator. First time for them. They're going to be growing and learning together. With your Trey or Terrell, with your quarterback or a cornerback, you want to play football. Once you hit that magic number of 27, 28, the NFL doesn't want to invest 3 years in you. And then, as Dave Naylor said, 30 or 31, they're not going to wait that long. They want to catch you right out of university, get you educated in their system right away. Of course, the other thing you got to think of too, anytime you get a starter that's a DB and a Canadian, you're looking at ratio, which is going to help the Elks. And if anything, if you look back at what Ed Hervey did in free agency, he went after Canadian free agents. He wanted to stock the shelves. Ed Hervey went hard and basically picked the Argonauts cupboard almost bare to get Canadian talent into Edmonton.
I feel that's the difference between Ed Hervey and Chris Jones, is that understanding of the necessity of deep Canadian talent on your roster. Not that Jones was against having Canadians on the team by any means, and obviously he had to for ratio, but I think Ed Hervey has prioritized that Canadian depth, and that's how you build strong teams and Grey Cup caliber teams in the CFL.
Look at the teams that had the most Canadian snaps and got the extra draft picks as a result of it. Winnipeg, Grey Cup attendee, and BC, been in the playoffs every year. If you've got a solid Canadian core, and you could start 8, 9, 10. You don't have to worry about who comes onto the field. If you've got that much Canadian talent out there, if somebody is having an off day or if there's an injury or an assignment that has to be changed, you can shuffle in anybody because you've got more than enough out there already.
Third down.
If Bo Levi Mitchell can bring the Hamilton Tiger Cats to the promised land in 2025 in Winnipeg, he sees it in his dream that that would be it. He'd walk off the field a champion.
What a way to go out. I think that would be fantastic. Ending the current longest Grey Cup drought. The Tiger Cats have not won since the year started with a 2. 1999 was the last Grey Cup championship for them. So for Bo Levi Mitchell to be able to deliver that for the Hamilton Tiger Cats, I see that as a dream situation for him to have that Grey Cup trophy in his hand and just walk off into the sunset. I don't know how many more years he has if they don't win it this year either. Again, we talked about Trevor Harris and his age, and Zach Collaros and his age. Bo Levi Mitchell's another guy in that mid to late 30s range that is looking into the future that isn't on the gridiron.
Bo is in his mid-30s. He had his best statistical year in a long time last year, throwing for nearly 5,500 yards with 32 touchdowns. He looked like he finally felt comfortable in that Scott Milanovich system. He can probably do what he wants to do with that team. Their offense is probably going to be fine. Their defense is their question mark. How good is it going to be? Ted Gavea is making changes with that lineup. He's bringing in a lot of people that he trusted in Winnipeg to help fill some of the needs that they had in Hamilton. And if the Tiger Cats can get off to a better start, I mean, they started so woefully last year. Give them a couple 3 wins in the first 5 weeks. And that Eastern Division, as you remember, I talked to Ben Grant, he thought it would be a barroom brawl because all of these teams are so tightly compacted in terms of their talent level.
They are. It's going to be a real high caliber level of football coming from the East this year. I'm not sleeping on the West. I know there's a lot of talent out West here as well, but I think that the real strength of the CFL is all 4 of those Eastern teams. There's not a lot to choose from, and I don't see anybody running away with that East Division.
if anybody can, they're going to be in a major driver's seat to get to the Grey Cup, because you only need the one win and you're through. The Tiger Cats can do it. They've got a great receiving core. As I said, their offensive line seems strong. They've got maybe a question mark at running back. We'll see how that plays out. But on the flip side of the ball, they've made some changes on defense, and that's where I think they're going to have to really sort of come together. Sort of the same situation as the Toronto Argonauts, who have been sort of scorched with free agents being pulled away from them. Now they've got to rebuild that defense as well. Those two teams, who knows? They could be in the East Final. It could be Montreal, or Ottawa may have a lot to say about it. And this is what makes it fun. At this point in the season, and we haven't even played a game, I can't tell you who's going to finish first in the East.
We're at that point where things move quickly, though. We've got that draft out of the way now. Camps will be opening up before too long, and blink and we're into the preseason games before you know it.
Stuart Johnson's first go-round as commissioner of the CFL, he already came out and made some strong statements about the game. He wants it to be entertaining. He wants it to be exciting, and he wants that to be sort of like the catapult that fires this league forward. He is in favor of the single point. He's in favor of the dribble kick to get the first down. All the things that some of the pundits think aren't really part of football, although I'd love to know where that definition is in any dictionary, what football actually is, that includes or disapproves of the single point. He loves it the way it is. He's a fan of the game as it is. He doesn't want to monkey with that. He is looking long-term, and of course, he's got that television contract to think about. Bell Media, who owns the rights, is interested. As we've talked about here, does he ever open up the door to have somebody else come in and have a chance at this?
Well, in one of his first official roles, he was back in familiar confines as he was in TSN studios for the CFL draft. So it was a nice way to ease into the job for Stu Johnson this week. But now the real work starts. And I agree with you that broadcast contract negotiation is the first major hurdle for him to get over for the success of the league.
Third Down Gamble uses the expert resources of the Canadian Football League and 3 Down Nation. For up-to-date, insightful statistics and analysis, please visit cfl.ca and 3downnation.com. The CFL on CBC theme music is used with written permission from the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation.
Thank you for listening to our show. Third Down Gamble is hosted on Podbean. Follow us on Twitter, where our handle is @ThirdDownGamble. Join us again next time. The Third Down Gamble podcast. Audio worth watching.